Hello and welcome to Mike's Garage. What can I say? We're back. It's a beautiful day. It's been so cold lately I haven't wanted to go out to the garage. Now I know there are people that are much colder than me in Southern California, and for that I apologize. But hey, it's been cold and I've been staying in the house where it's warm. Anyway, what I wanted to show, actually what I want to say first is, by all means, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. The next thing I want to say is be sure when you subscribe that you click on the little notification bell so you'll be notified every time we put a new video up. All right, that's it. I'm done. I'm not going to advertise anymore. What I am going to do is today we're going to show rocker boxes. Now, in building shovel heads and doing shovel heads on the YouTube channel, we haven't shown much on rocker arms, and I realize that. I'm getting questions about them. And so I'm going to tell you the way I do it. May not be the way everyone else does it. It may be. I don't know. It's not my day to watch. But I'm going to give you my opinion on it. It's the way I like to do it. It's worked for me for a long time. You know, I got an awful lot of comments on how well that shovel head motor built that I did for Turner's Customs that went into the bike they restored. The motor really, really does sound good. And I'd like to apologize to the guys out there that say, it's not a motor, it's an engine. Yes, it is an engine, but it's a good sounding engine, was the point. In building an engine, especially these older engines, everything in them was hand-fitted, so if you're hand-fitting everything, then you can make everything match, everything sounds good, but it takes a lot of time and effort to do that. You don't necessarily want to pay someone to do all that, besides the fact that the guy that you pay may not be the guy who knows how to do that. So sometimes you just have to do it yourself. Now, these are roller rocker arms. This is a normal shovel head rocker box. In fact, it's a later model one than I wanted to use, but it's off of my own road bike there. But it's off the head. The heads are all done now. We showed them in the last video. They're covered up. Okay, there they are. So now we're down to the rocker boxes. I've been doing a real exploratory procedure, a bunch of exploratory procedures on this motor because I just didn't like the way it sounded. And since it's my engine, it's going to sound the way I want it to. One of the biggest things as far as making sound on a shovel head is the rocker arms. Now, the rocker arms on a shovel head are kind of neat in that you can set the end play on them, whereas a lot of motors you cannot. On a shovel head, it's not too hard. So what I'm going to do is, now these are probably still set from the last time I did them, but the end play is checked inside the rocker box. We can see it here. What I'm going to do is tighten this one up. I've got my finger in the other end of it to see that it's not turning. Now, if you read in the book, excuse me, I got something in my throat today. No weird comments, please. If you read in the service manual, Harley-Davidson says 4 to 24 thousandths end play. To me, 24 thousandths means they're going to bang and clang, and I don't really want to listen to the rocker arm slamming back and forth in the engine. If you set them at 4 thousandths, you have to remember that this rocker box is a big chunk of aluminum. And being a big chunk of aluminum, when it gets hot, it swells a lot. And on a hot day with a hot running motor, you can take up all of that end play. So 4,000ths, and I knew a guy who used to set them at 4, and I used to say, you're setting them too tight. And I must say that all of them he set at 4,000ths did seize. So right now I can check this one, and that shows about 8,000ths. There's 9. And here's 10. Okay, it's 9. That was, I had to jam it in there. When I tighten it down, it'll be about 9, which to me is around perfect. My preference is 8 to 10, but I want them all to match. If this one's going to be 8, I want this one at 8. I want all 4 of them to sound the same. If you've got one at 20,000ths and the rest of them are at 8, you're going to have one noisy rock arm. It's going to be that noise that you're going to chase the whole time you own the motorcycle. When am I ever going to get rid of that sound? Whereas if all 4 of them have a little bit of a click to them, it's no big deal. You have 4 going click, 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 click. Not a big deal. But if you've got one real noisy one, it's going to drive you nuts. So also in the book, they say do not over-tighten them. My problem is that I've dealt with customers for a lot of years. And I don't want to say that bikers like to drink or anything like that, but when you're out in the middle of nowhere on your shovel head and you get off it to cool down, maybe have a beer, and you look at that motor and you realize that you're leaking from the rocker arm shaft, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to tighten it. So even though you did what the factory said and you didn't over-tighten it, it's going to get over-tightened. So the way I do them is I tighten them down real tight and I get the end plays where I want them with the shafts very, very tight. Now I'm going to show how to actually set those end plays. We'll say that we had more end play than we wanted. Let's say we had 20,000ths here and we wanted to take some out. Now this is a really lengthy procedure and you have to work at it for a while to get them right, but it is so worth it in the sound of the finished engine. So I'm going to pull this shaft out. Excuse me. Okay, there it is. And there's everything. Now this pad goes right here in the rocker box. And when it's all bolted together nice and tight, there's where the end play is. This pad goes right against this shoulder here. In fact, let's have a quick look at that. There it is. Now, in the past, a lot of people have used shims to shim them to the desired end play. I prefer not to do that. I don't like extra parts in here, the possibility of them disintegrating, work hardening, and falling apart. I've seen too much of that, so I don't add any parts. What I will do is take this shaft, chuck it up in the lathe, and maybe I'll take a few thousandths off of this shoulder. And that'll get it close. You can do that, or you can actually counterbore right here. There are any number of ways to do it to get to that end result of that, for me, 8 or 10 thousandths. But even at that, if I have one of them at 8, I want all of them at 8. If one of them is at 9, I want all of them at 9. Or 10. That's not bad. And it's not a horrible sound if you can hear them a little bit. But the idea is, what have I got going on here? There it goes. But the idea is that they're all the same end play, the same measurement. And it's not hard to get in there with a feeler gauge and measure them. And then when I put them together, I'll use a little sealant on this little crush washer here. So it'll seal up that end. And at the other end, there's an O-ring goes in here. Get the proper O-ring. And don't get discouraged if it leaks on the first time you put it together. It's so common for those to leak. And you put new O-rings in, you may have to do it twice, or you may even try some ramjet seals, which work in there too. And I've used every one of those things, and sometimes the hole is a little large and you have to try something a little bit different, but that's all you've got. We've already done the oil lines to the rocker boxes, so for all intents and purposes, we've done these rocker boxes. The other thing I want to mention, this is a late model rocker box, and at one time I put this on my motorcycle, didn't have enough clearance, and I ground it open for the clearance I needed. So that's it. There it is. I think I'll finish them up when nobody's looking, but I think you pretty well understand what it takes to do them. Very common stuff that a lot of people do it, and again, however you arrive at that measurement, you know, one more thing I want to mention I forgot to say. When you're making these measurements, you want to be very careful that you still keep everything in the centers it's supposed to be into. These are roller rockers, so I want these rollers to be in the center here. And where the push rod goes in here, in the push rod hole, I want that to be in the center. So be careful you don't get too far off center. I think that's about it for rocker boxes for today. However, we are at the end of the video, and so it's time to talk about the bike that I'm getting ready to build. Last time we looked, I showed the, let's see if I can get over here. I showed this VL front end. It's a 1930 to 36 VL. I'm sure there's someone out there who's looking and can tell me exactly what year it is, and I don't know. The other thing is, I also went out to the parts room and found my top tree for this front end. This is a real VL top tree, and I think we'll dream up some wild screw-in risers. But anyway, that's the front end, which we've already shown. Now, I have to explain something. I can't help it. I grew up in San Bernardino in the old days. My dad was an old biker. My dad was born in 1913. He died in 1987. What I'm getting at is terminology. Everywhere I go, everything is called a bobber now. A lot of people don't even know what the word means. To bob something is to trim it or shorten it. In the old days when women first started cutting their hair, they had bobbed hair. When my dad referred to a motorcycle where the fenders had been bobbed, he called it a bob job. Then I remember hearing the term California bobber. I'm sure there were bobbed motorcycles all over the world, that California is not the only place there were bobbed motorcycles. But the practice was generally to take a rear fender and take the last piece off, which is normally hinged, so that you can change the rear tire. So I have here a typical old bobbed fender from the day, which lets you in a little bit more on what this motorcycle is going to be. It's going to be a bobber, or as my dad would say, a bob job, which means it'll cost less money to paint. And for me, that means it'll also be a road bike. Also, because of the fender and the braces, you can see it's going to be a rigid frame. Maybe on our next video, we'll get the frame out and have a look at that. But yeah, it's going to be a rigid frame, but it's going to have a very well suspended seat. In other words, for me, this is going to be a road bike, so you can bet your life there will be enough travel in that seat, and I'll be able to get on it and go great distances. So that's it. That's all we have for today. I have more stuff I have to get busy on, and hopefully we'll speak again real soon. So until then, see you out on the road.